Welcome to another episode of the Spoon Mob podcast. On this episode, which was originally intended to be a mini update episode, Chef Jordan Anthony Brown, who's getting ready to open the Aperture, he comes back on the podcast and we talk about the progress and kind of where he's at in the process as they get closer to opening. Looking at kind of like a October opening. Originally, I think it was slated for late summer, and they're just kind of, stuff takes a little bit longer and just to get ready and everything. So he wanted to come back on and kind of update everyone on the process. If you didn't check out Jordan's first episode, it's episode number 36. He was on a long time ago when he first started kind of getting rolling with this project. He did a guest chef dinner at that time, a couple months before, over at Chapman's Eat Market with BJ Lieberman, who he used to work with, and they know each other and everything. So Jordan reached out, always have a standing invitation for anybody to come back on the podcast. And he was like, hey, I'd like to come on and, kind of update everybody. So normally mini episodes are like 20, 30 minutes. This essentially turned into a full-fledged episode. It's like an hour long. Jordan really gets in the weeds, kind of gets all nerdy about just kind of the process and his mindset and just where he's at, thinking about different aspects of the restaurant. And we cover, the menu, kind of what he's looking at doing with that, construction process, just kind of the stress of opening a restaurant too as well, how that kind of all falls on you when it's your restaurant and you're trying to make decisions. And anytime you can have somebody that takes a decision possibly off your plate is become this welcome addition where you think it would be the inverse and you would want everything to come through you, but it just kind of gets to the point where it's like your list is so long, you're like, somebody just take this off. So it's like gone. It's really informative. And, it's kind of like a behind the scenes of opening a restaurant. And it's one of the most anticipated restaurants in Cincinnati. I think it's the Aperture and Wildweed by David and Lydia Jackman getting ready to open too as well. I think they kind of both have almost like the same timeline, I feel like now. But those are like two of the most anticipated restaurants in Cincinnati. So really looking forward to both of them opening. But Jordan's food's awesome. And I'm really excited to see what he does with the menu and kind of what all comes out of what he's thinking too as well. And they're going to do some wine stuff from some local, kind of distributors. I think Parcel and Chris are going to be involved with some of the wine that they have there on site and everything. But that'll be a lot to do with kind of the beverage director that winds up, coming on board and what local beers that they're going to want to choose that kind of pair well with the food and everything like that too. So it's a pretty unique time in kind of his process where they're just getting started to ramp up with kind of senior level staff and everything. But they're going to put out a link through Instagram. So if you're interested in applying for open roles and everything like that, you'll be able to go through the Aperture's Instagram handle, take you right to their kind of website and going through the forms and everything. So you can follow Jordan on Instagram, J. Anthony Brown. Also follow the restaurant. It's the Aperture Cincy, but it's Cinci. I always spell Cincy when I abbreviate it with a Y. That might actually be the incorrect way. I feel like everybody who's from Cincinnati uses Cinci. And then all of us outsiders use the Y. That's where you can follow him on Instagram. You can follow us too as well at Spoon Mob. Check out our website, spoonmob.com. Links to all the episodes with all the guests, past, current, all that stuff. It's broken up in categories, kind of depending on what their primary skill set is. We have sommeliers, but some of them are beverage directors, some are wine directors, some are GMs. We have a section that's insiders, people that are in the hospitality industry, but in a different way. Chocolatiers are in there, cheesemongers, fish purveyors, beer, brewmasters, all that stuff is kind of falls in that category. And then we have the chefs and bakers in the other category too as well. So you can click on any of those individual pages. They're ordered from most recent release to kind of the oldest. There's food photos, contact information, different links to, their individual episode, all that stuff is there. You can find it. There's also a contact portal on the main page there that you can click on. You can send in questions, comments, feedback. If there's a question you ever wanted to ask a sommelier or a chef or someone, send that in. We'll incorporate it in an upcoming episode, whichever kind of fits best. And then we'll hit you back, let you know who the guest was, what episode that is, so you can kind of keep an eye out for it and be part of the podcast. Make sure to follow the podcast on whatever preferred app that you use, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon Music. Those are kind of the big four. And then there's a bunch of other little ones, Podcast Republic, Pocket Casts, Spreaker, Deezer's another one, iHeartRadio, we're on there too as well. So if there's a platform that you use that you can't find us on for some reason, just shoot us an email or through the contact portal. Our email is spoonmob@yahoo.com. We'll take a look, make sure that we're on there and it's updating correctly, but everything should be good to go. I check that stuff periodically just in case there's any glitches. You can also follow us on our YouTube channel. Put all the episodes up there just a week after they hit all the podcast apps. So if YouTube's your preferred player, you can find us there too as well. Every episode is up there. We're on the other social medias, but mainly just use Instagram. We don't really do much with anything else anymore just because Twitter is not a fun place. Reddit is having a bunch of issues. TikTok, I just don't want to do video content. Like, I'll just be honest. So, but yeah, you can find us mainly on the Instagram, and then check out the website and just subscribe to the podcast. It's kind of the three things that you can find us that we're most active. Without any further delays, here is an update on the Aperture with Chef Jordan Anthony Brown, who's down in Cincinnati, Ohio. Well, since you were last on the podcast, like you said, I think October 2021, you did a bunch of pop-ups at Bar Say So in Cincinnati, which I'm assuming was kind of some menu development and also just try and stay busy too as well. But you've also been working, obviously, on getting the Aperture ready to open. So that should be opening, I think, this summer, this fall. So how's that process been going? Where are you at with it?
When we spoke last time, like I said, 2021, after a while of telling people soon, 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 after a while, I just kind of shut up and just like, I'll let you know when it actually happens. It was kicking the can down the road and not in the best way. So yeah, in October 2021, I was working at, spending some time at Baker's Table in Newport. And then kind of after leaving that, really started to dig back in on the process for the Aperture, which, post-pandemic, it just wasn't as easy to pick up the pieces as I thought, and a lot of things changed. We kind of were playing whack-a-mole with essentially the project cost and then the budget. Something would go up, and then we would have to, tack on some more money and then take something off. And that process was pretty, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't frustrating and just kind of trying, just, things moving slower than you wanted to. And, at that time, the pandemic was still, wasn't where we are now. Let's put it that way. I think it's still relatively fresh in people's minds. So there was some trepidation. I did a pop-up, in February, I think of 2022 at Bar Say So, just kind of Valentine's Day thing. And that snowballed into almost kind of like a residency thing. They have a adjacent property, the Carriage House, which has kitchen, kind of a big island, just kind of set up shop there for most of the spring and summer. And that kind of became, I guess, home base for the time being for, trying out different things. Up until that point, I hadn't really been doing a lot of cooking that I thought was closer to the Aperture. Obviously, you need a little bit more space and time and tools. So that was a fun opportunity. Brought in some people, did some, different things, and mostly on Sundays, but different wine events. And at the same time, we would do those. Basically, the week would look like, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, do kind of some menu planning, but also working on stuff for the Aperture, meetings and trying to do as much as I could, and then kind of get ready for the weekend. And so we had this space where it was the, kitchen, but also kind of like a war room office. And, we enjoyed the time that we had there. Me and a guy named Seth Ridgel, who's going to be part of the team at the Aperture, primarily running the show. But eventually I realized, it was as good as the Carriage House was and as good as it felt to be cooking and getting some plates out there, especially in that setting. I needed to dedicate more time to the Aperture. I basically was falling behind. There basically just wasn't enough time to do it. And so that was kind of a learning experience of what it really takes to dig in and go full time on something. And obviously, now that we're here, once I did that, it did go quickly. So we were at the Carriage House, I think, up until July or so of 2022, and June, July, August. And then those last 4 months of the year were pretty much, full steam ahead on making sure that we could close all of our deals and actually start building the restaurant, which, eventually we did reach that goal, yeah.
Having to do this cost allocation on the fly where this costs more money than you thought, so now you got to reallocate. How much of that could you trace back to just inflation, the pandemic, supply chain issues? Is this just kind of the way opening a restaurant just sometimes goes?
I would say it's a little bit of both. This is the first time I built a full-scale restaurant, so I don't have a long table of comparison. But cost of materials, for the building. Our contractor was just, honest with us about, metal, wood, whatever it is, going up in price. Equipment, things increasing, just pure markup. I think that inflation was a big part of it. Our project costs, I think, ended up from where we were basically March 2020 when the pandemic hit and getting ready to kind of start moving on construction to when we actually closed the deal. I think the project had gone up total about $120,000. which I have it written down somewhere. It's something as you can imagine, I don't like to look at very much. It's like a bad dream. The way we structured our deal, we pieced together a large chunk of debt from an SBA loan, and fortunately, that had held pretty steady because we'd already signed on for it. So the terms that we had, pre-pandemic were relatively similar to what we ended up having when we closed the deal, and they were able to increase the loan a little bit. Some tenant improvement money from our landlord model group that chipped in a little bit more. And then the biggest thing was our capital raise for investor money. We ended up raising about $450,000. But the challenge with that was basically the pool of investors we had, in 2020 was, some of them dropped off, some of them, so we basically had to kind of change up the whole mix and really revisit a lot of the legal and financial structure. So yeah, the cost going up was a challenge. And then in order to kind of offset that, you can do it in two ways. You can grab more money, or you can, find ways to decrease costs. So, we made some cuts to certain things, relatively significant, but overall really positive design change. And so it's kind of just like a seesaw of like, how can we get to everything in the middle so that, everybody feels comfortable enough to really sign off on everything. And, a lot of people had their hands in this, there are a lot of parties, especially kind of our architectures, our contractors, and of course, model group that really held steady through the pandemic. I can't necessarily say that would have been the case, in all scenarios, but everybody was very relieved when we finally got to the finish line, which was basically right before Christmas of last year.
So where's construction at now? Is it done? Almost done?
Construction is we're kind of percentage-wise, if I had to say, we're probably coming up on the approaching the final third. If that makes sense. The build out of the Aperture is again, with lack of comparison, pretty aggressive and complicated for the fact, but mainly the fact that it's an old building. So we had a fair amount of mechanical challenges, a lot of which due to the fact that we're putting in basically a 5-foot wood-fired hearth. And in order to accommodate that, you have to have the proper exhaust. And, there were certain places where we could put the exhaust chase and lining and certain places we couldn't. So that was actually, relatively big challenge. And we had to make some adjustments and we kind of overcame that hurdle. But then there's been a few things here and there. Long story short, coming up on the end of kind of the mechanical and electrical and like plumbing. So everything behind the walls pretty soon here. We actually had our hoods delivered the other week, right around July 4th. And I think they're going in next week. They're just sitting on, in the restaurant, which is, most people, restaurants having the hoods go in is a pretty big milestone. And once we can kind of clear those challenges, we're moving more into the kind of aesthetic, drywall, paint, starting to order furniture. The restaurant's a little bit, not strange, but there's essentially very few walls just because of the way it's structured. I mean, the exterior is almost all windows, which is, from like a drywall and paint standpoint, it's pretty good. You don't really have to do much, and we're putting up shades, but we're pretty close to approaching that, not necessarily say easier, but a little more self-explanatory where it's, drywall, paint this. And then, of course, the other thing is getting our equipment in, which will be, from what I understand, pretty challenging because it's one big piece that comes, our line from Heston that comes as one piece. Some of the stuff is funny. They were putting our makeup air unit on the roof the other day, and I was kind of watching. It's like you kind of want to watch, but don't want to watch. It's just, obviously, our team's great and they know what they're doing, but you just, your mind, is your worst case scenario type thing. And so you want to, it's like, our hoods are going in. I think they're going to start putting them up, next week. And part of me wants to go see how they do it. Part of me is just stop by when they're done. But yeah, the hoods going in is going to be, a fairly big milestone. I mean, I think the restaurant has a lot of kind of mechanical, different stuff on the floor right now that's being put up. And I think once a lot of that stuff is in place, it'll start to really getting to beyond just the bones of it, but more kind of the meat coming on too.
What was the building before? Because it's on the corner. So was it a bank or like a jewelry store or something? Like it has that vibe.
Yeah, it has a very long history. It's Art Deco building, Paramount Square. I probably, for purposes like this, should know the history of it a little bit better. But I know it's been anything from, I think, a theater, pawn shop, jewelry store. I think it might have been a pharmacy at one point. It has a long history. It's a crazy building, and there's residential above us, and then our neighbors next door, Esoteric Brewing. And so it's definitely a building that to retrofit a pretty modern restaurant into was had some challenges. But we have a great team. I mean, honestly, I've really enjoyed working with our architects and contractors, and especially me being essentially kind of a one one-person team, for the most part, in terms of actually executing kind of decisions. You almost sometimes want your architects or your contractors to tell you what's best. You're kind of just like, I don't feel like making a decision as long as it's not going to impact anything serious. And they've been great about that, just taking a few things off my plate when, low stakes things where it's just like, makes me realize I could never be a contractor. Some of the stuff these guys have had to do, I'm just like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys.
The construction point, has that been pretty much on schedule in terms of doing all the like no real delays, where all the delays were kind of upfront with really getting started and giving all the paperwork together?
We've definitely had some delays. I mean, I think when it's all said and done, from the original projected amount of time, I think we'll probably tapped on, I'd say 4 to 6 weeks, which that's my estimate. And obviously we're still not done, but by and large, that's, I put up the sign and just said summer 2021. And, technically summer ends September 21st. So when we're all done, and we're not going to be far off, but you go in expecting delays. It just, depends on where they come from. So far, a lot of them have been solvable problems and within our control for the most part. There hasn't been anything catastrophic where we had to, scrap something entirely or change anything significant. But yeah, I mean, we have a lot of it is just based on where the kitchen, there's basically one place we could have put the kitchen, and we could have put it other places in the restaurant, but it would have been more complicated to structure kind of the mechanical exhaust part. I'm sure everybody listening to this is like, yeah, this is super interesting. I really want to hear about this. It's all working out fine now. I mean, I think everybody is starting to breathe easy, and every box is getting checked, no corners really being cut. And we're excited to kind of see the visuals of it soon. It's hard for me to explain it to people just because it's still just kind of a box of metal and wood, but I think that'll come along pretty quickly in the next kind of couple months here.
So do you have a set opening date or not one that you're willing to put out there yet?
I guess for the purposes of keeping, right now our contractor, we met the other day and they're really pushing hard to have the space wrapped up pretty much right around October 1st. Some of that actually, it's actually at the point where some of that's on me, where I need to, start moving on furniture and fixtures. And I actually did a lot of that this week. So I guess it's good and bad. That's within my control. So, if there's more delays, it's kind of on me. And if we are able to circle kind of like around October 1st in that range, plus a week or so, we'll probably be opening, I'd say mid to late October, which ironically, when I first started doing this, fall is my favorite month, or fall is my favorite time of the year. So that's originally when I wanted to open. Obviously this is 3 years later, but I think it's a good time of year to open for us. Cooking wise, fall's great. A lot of, you still get good produce, and especially if it's been a hot summer, which it looks like it might be trending that way, you get some residual, summer produce, tomatoes and whatnot. But also just kind of the energy, especially in a place like Cincinnati where it is, family oriented in a lot of cases. Kids are back in school. People are kind of back on schedule. Summer's a little, as far as I can tell, touch and go here, just because vacations, for the past 3-4 weeks, every other day I get an out of office from somebody, which is, that's just what this time of year is. And then I think one of the gifts and curses of potentially opening in that October period is we open, the weather's great. I think everybody has a sense of kind of relaxation, but then the energy for the holidays builds pretty quickly. So we're gonna, from an operational standpoint, probably gonna have to get our feet under us really quickly if we're gonna, be able to accommodate the holiday season and potentially, ride some momentum into January, February, typically the slow months. But yeah, I think I'm actually happy with when we're going to open, how we got there. That's a different story. But October, we're going to make October happen.
Mostly going to be using local farms, purveyors, or what's that kind of mix look like?
As much as possible. I mean, we've, one of the weird parts about this process is because it's taken so long, I've had probably more time than I needed or wanted to kind of build things out. So I have lists and have made a lot of connections with a lot of people. We're definitely going to be produce-wise as local as possible, and especially proteins as well. There's a lot of great people we're talking to, especially some of the people down at Findlay Market who, sell the produce themselves and the meat, but also have connections to others. The one challenge I think we'll run into, and obviously because we're in Ohio, is we do want to pretty seafood heavy in comparison to a lot of what you see kind of in Midwestern markets. A lot of people say it's hard, you can't do it. I mean, it's fine. You can do it. It's logistically, it's there's more remote places that get seafood than Ohio. We're not that far from the coasts. Obviously, local, you can get some stuff local. I know there's some trout farms and there, obviously these things coming out of up north. But we're definitely going to have to find our sources for seafood, shellfish, things like that. And that's just, comes with the territory. And a lot of it is based on the influence. We're really going to go pretty heavily on the Mediterranean region in terms of our cooking. I'd say that'll probably account for 80 to 85% of kind of the way we view food, give or take. And because of that, obviously, it's a region, you're on the coast, you're in one of the most vibrant kind of coastal regions in the world. And in order to reflect that, we want to, make sure we're representing that properly with seafood and things that come out of the water.
Menu structure, is it going to be tasting menu, a la carte, mix of both, prefix?
A la carte, really. So the idea of the restaurant is based around the concept of, at a high level, meze, which is, a common type of, way to eat, Greece and kind of in the Levantine region, parts of the world that have, essentially it's a communal kind of quote unquote drinking food, whether it's like anapasti and trattorias in Italy, ouzerias in Greece, even over in Thailand with the cap clem is what they call it, izakayas in Japan. And that's kind of what we want to reflect, is a lot of the food that really is meant to be kind of served at will and shared at ease. And so, you could find 1,000 memes and jokes about, shared plates, but that's the direction we're going to trend toward. And there's some wrinkles. I think eventually we'll introduce kind of something where it's, you just let the kitchen cook for you, which is, more, not necessarily a tasting menu, but kind of a family style feast. But by and large, I think the biggest thing with the menu is that we want it to flow in a balanced way. And what I mean by that is, if you look at menus from restaurants probably 30 years ago, by and large, it was, app, entree, dessert, kind of that more traditional style, or a tasting menu extrapolated to more courses. And then obviously over time, more avant-garde restaurants brought in the, shared plates and just kind of a menu of, a kind of mix of dishes. And I actually love that. I think, as I think we talked before, Rose's Luxury in DC, where I really cut my teeth. That's, how the menu is structured. And I think there's a lot that comes with that and a lot of the freedom. But for us, if we're going to kind of stick to the idea of some of, meze and some of those different ideas, it really is menu that's supposed to go light to heavy. So you start with kind of maybe bread and some light vegetables, pickles, things like that. And then you kind of flow toward things that are progressively, when I say heavy, I don't necessarily mean kind of over-satiating, but just, your proteins are at the end. Maybe we have some grains kind of in the second half of the menu. And our big thing is balance and focus, really having the menu be something where, if you came in with, maybe a group of 4 or 5 people and ordered the whole menu, you could get through it and feel, full, but not, like you're walking out of the restaurant feeling like you just ate way too much for comfort. That's definitely going to be a challenge for the kitchen. A lot of that comes with kind of being restrained with kind of the way we approach cooking. Sometimes you may look at a dish and say, this is awesome, I love it, but where does it fit on the menu? Is it too heavy? Is this the right time of year for it? And there is a point of scrutinizing that stuff where you go too far, and you're R&Ding a dish for 6 weeks just to see, the produce on it go out of season. But, a lot of that will be a focus of, for me at the top and disseminated throughout the restaurant about how we look at the food and how we serve it.
So once kind of the restaurant finds its groove, changing the menu, gonna just kind of rotate dishes in and out, kind of depending on ingredients and seasonality, or do a complete overhaul like 4 times a year?
It'll be more the former. An overhaul, an annual overhaul is pretty hard. It's also pretty jarring for not just guests, but your staff. It's like, okay, 4 times a year, you pretty much have to scrap the entire menu. Doesn't really work from an inventory standpoint either, unless you're really, really dialed in on it. Part of the value of the menu for us and the way I'd like to utilize it internally is to have that flexibility, where we can add on a dish and say a farmer comes to us and says, hey, I have these great, perfect cherry tomatoes, but I only have them for 6 weeks. It's like, all right, let's quickly find something that this can apply to, that we can take advantage of this and really show the product off. And part of that, again, is back to that restraint where it's like, hey, we got to do this quickly. Let's let the product shine. And sometimes, that may involve, pushing a dish off the menu that, may not have been there that long. Or in a lot of cases, what I'd like to do is utilize specials, in order to bring things to guests that might be a little new and unfamiliar or interesting, but in a kind of controlled context. And some of that also has to do with price point too. If you, for example, I love caviar, but the caviar in a normal menu is kind of a, it's a sticker shock type thing and really not necessarily the vibe that we're going for. And so, yeah, I think we really want to be basically enable ourselves to be flexible. Easier said than done. That'll come with time. I think a big thing we want to do as soon as we're able to is start to build a larder. So pickles, maybe ferments and things, different spices, dried items, so that we have all these tools at our disposal to enhance or create a dish, without having to buy new product or bring that in and, vinegars, whatever it is. And that's also, if you were able to do it correctly, and it can be a vehicle toward using waste, whether it's like fruit scrap that you turn into vinegar or something that you dehydrate to turn into a powder. And so that'll hopefully go a long way toward, utilizing as much product as possible and eliminating the waste in the restaurant. And again, that flexibility, I think that applies to, the wine program too and the beverage program. Sometimes the way I describe the restaurant feels kind of a wine bar on steroids. We really want to be, pair with wine a lot. There's some, really fantastic natural wine coming into Cincinnati, and the state in general. I'm up in Columbus. I know there's a lot of places going up there. Voyager. We just had Natty Wine Fest here a few days. I think there's 500-600 people there. A lot of wine being poured, and so we really want to show that off and enable that to be a place where the wine is paired with food, and have the beverage program be flexible as well. Kind of the same in the same vein. If Randy from Winecraft or Chris from Parcel comes and says, "Hey, I have like 3 cases of this crazy stuff, but it's all I got." It's like, let's put it on the menu. Let's not deprive our guests of the experience, because of our inflexibility. And obviously the other part is don't deprive our staff of the ability to taste the product, to utilize it, to sell it, to learn about it. And I think keeping those things in mind too. And a lot of times that flexibility, in my opinion, is just as, if not more important for the staff as it is for the guests. If you're serving the same food for 6 months out the year and nothing changes on your station, or you're pouring the same wine, then that really limits and hinders development. So a lot of that is keeping things simple. Our menu at any given time, I'd say we'll have no more than 15 dishes on it. Maybe even smaller than that. And that's in order to coming up with 15 good dishes is hard. People sometimes see menus with like 40 dishes on it, and it's just like there's some of those are just going to be a little bit lacking, and that's nobody's fault. It's just that I think people would be surprised that you go to a restaurant sometimes, some of my favorites, and you have like 12 dishes and every single one was incredible. That's hard. That's way harder than people think it is, especially to make them taste nuanced and different, and balanced and kind of play off of each other. So yeah, I think that balance and flexibility is going to be a huge part of the food, the service, the beverage program. We just have access to so much stuff. And I just, if we can enhance our ability to access it and not deprive ourselves of being able to utilize it and show it off, then that's a pretty significant goal of ours internally.
I'm assuming dinner only to start. Lunch, brunch, yes, no, depends on what the market dictates.
The beginning, the plan is to be Tuesday through Saturday, dinner only, 5 to 10. Walnut Hills, and as it is now, especially with all the things happening with commercial real estate and offices, lunch is just a little bit challenging. Maybe down the road, but that would really be dependent on just general traffic and what's going on in the neighborhood. I do think there's an opportunity for us to integrate brunch, and I hope I'm not alienating people that may want to apply to work at the restaurant. They hear the word brunch and like, nope, I'm out. But I think so. One of the first things when the pandemic hit in restaurants, obviously eventually they had to go much further than this and go to pure takeout or delivery. But one of the first services to cut was brunch. I think if you're gonna eliminate something that is touch and go in your revenue stream and your staff, it's going to be brunch or lunch. And I think a lot of places just never really brought it back. Maybe realized it wasn't worth it. And so I do think there's an opportunity for us to get in the brunch game. If we did, it would probably be Sunday only, just because I think flipping services is really challenging. If you're able to do kind of Sunday brunch and then everybody knock it out and go home and have the rest of the day off, or then Monday too, I think that's, from an operational standpoint, a little more executable. And I think the opportunity to do brunch in a different way, obviously like Mediterranean, so wouldn't necessarily be a lot of the things you'd see on a traditional brunch menu. But look, at the end of the day, like everybody in the industry, it's not running joke that brunch is terrible, but at the end of the day, brunch is also fun. People really enjoy it, and I think it would be an opportunity for us to showcase basically a different type of experience in a brunch setting that may not be you may not see at your more traditional restaurants that have just more simple brunch menus. But far easier said than done. The other thing too with the concept is that if you were to kind of look at it within my notes and even perhaps listen to the earlier episode of Spoon Mob and other things I may have done in the media, when I first conceived the restaurant, I think it was definitely going to be more kind of like rustic and just quick. I was coming off an environment where it's high volume, like quick plates, but still well executed food. And so that was kind of what was, from a recency bias and proximity standpoint in my head. And then I think over time I trended toward the fine dining side in terms of like the structure and what it was going to look like. I can give you 1,000 ways that this happened, but I do think now we're going to go back toward it's going to be definitely kind of in that like casual, like upscale casual range. A large reason being we really need the restaurant and want the restaurant to be a place that isn't living and dying on Fridays and Saturdays. If we can make this a place, if you look at the building right now in Walnut Hills, there's two, huge apartment buildings going up right behind us, a new one down the street. There's, I think, another couple. The neighborhood's really, exploding, and not just in a commercial way. I think there's really some dedication toward the residential aspect of it. We have the responsibility in that case to make it a place where people feel comfortable coming on a Tuesday or Wednesday for a glass of wine and a plate, or, come and crack their laptop at the bar and get a little work done. We have residents above us, behind us, and we really want to make that something that's accessible, not just, coming in on Fridays and Saturdays for the whole menu. And that's how you build a regular crowd. And that's how we really get to the heart of hospitality, where we build a crew of regulars that love coming in there. We know their name. We know the last glass of wine they had, what they prefer, their allergies, things like that. And to the heart of the restaurant, from a concept standpoint, it really is about that aspect of hospitality and community, and wanting to build something that I think may have been lost a little bit through the pandemic and tangential kind of things going on around that and derivative of that. And I think part of that is making sure that, we don't feel like we're, I guess, not too exclusive, but something where it's special occasion only. I think there's a time and a place for restaurants like that, but we really want to be accessible and above all, just, fun and comfortable.
How's the staffing process been?
Great question. It's the challenge of that is kind of, as I think alluded to earlier, I've done so many, like, we're going to open then. And it's, you have to kind of be respectful of people's, interest and time and patience. And so I've been a little bit intentionally tight-lipped about it, not for any negative reasons. If anything, the worst thing you can do is overpromise and underdeliver. And so I think only now, just recently, and then probably coming in the next week or so, we'll have a pretty realistic picture, now that a lot of the mechanical stuff, like I said, with the restaurant is starting to come to the finish line of the timeline. And with that in mind, I can now start, looking to build out a team. And pretty soon here we'll be, I think probably about the time this comes out, hopefully if I've done my job correctly, we'll have kind of started to gather resumes for management positions within the restaurant to see, if people are interested. One unique thing I want to do with that is I'm not going to go out there and say we're looking for a GM, we're looking for a sous chef, we're looking for, et cetera. It's more just see people's interests, their experiences, the scope of their kind of the competencies, what they've done in the past, what they like to do, what they don't like to do, and kind of go from there. At the end of the day, titles, for the most part, you can make up anyone you want and create the hierarchy, but a lot of it is really finding a team of people that are looking to, not redefine, but kind of reset some expectations with like what hospitality can be. That I say that not with respect just to guests, but also internally. We're doing a lot of things to build and start defining our internal culture, because it has to start there. If your staff and your employees don't feel comfortable and taken care of, and like they're working in a place that gives them the mutual respect that they're applying as well, then that goes a long way toward making sure that, the product that goes out to guests, whether it's service, wine, cocktails, of course, food is, in line with that. You can feel that kind of stuff. I've worked in restaurants where the staff's not that happy and you feel it. And I've worked in restaurants where the staff is, loves being there and loves working with each other and everybody's on the same page. And that can be pretty infectious and really kind of raises the level of what you're able to achieve. But again, staffing, we really want to, find people that are excited to work in hospitality and look at this hopefully as more of a career, which again, part of that is internals, in terms of, our health insurance we're providing and making sure this is a sustainable living, not just kind of something you're passing through. That's not necessarily giving you what you need. Throughout this process, obviously I've had, lawyers, financial, all kind of the professional aspect of things, but by and large, it's like a lot of unilateral decision making, and it's kind of coming up to the point where there's a lot of decisions that need to be made soon that really shouldn't be made by me, like bar cocktail glasses, like barware. Like I'm not going to be using that. So I'm not going to, order some stuff that whoever is our, leading our bar is not into. And, at the end of the day, it's making all these decisions in isolation for, the better part of 4 years is kind of getting old. Sometimes, you just want to relinquish control. And I know that sounds weird. A lot of people think it would be the opposite, but when you've been doing it that long, you're kind of you want other people to join the team.
With all that, how have you been dealing with the overall process from just a stress, anxiety? Like, have you lost like 30 pounds? Like, where are you at? Like, how do you stay balanced going through all this? Because it isn't a process that's done overnight. There's a lot of steps. There's a lot of waiting for somebody else to do the thing that they need to do, whether it's the contractor, the lawyer. A lot is in your control, but there are major aspects that aren't. So how do you kind of keep yourself from just spinning off the face of the earth, like, and losing your mind?
Well, I think one thing, I know this sounds strange, is because of the stops and starts of the process, I've almost had like practice having to manage that. You know what I mean? Like by the time this actually really got going, which is again essentially wasn't until December of last year, I'd kind of been doing that, pendulum for a while. It really has been a process of like learning to accept what you can and what's within your control. And I love checking things off lists. And so I would get stressed out if like I just couldn't do it because it was on somebody else. I needed something from this person and these people to coordinate. But it's also one of those where the job's never done, and it's kind of like taking this on in and of itself basically assures that my to-do list will never be done. It's just never going to happen. And I think working to accept that and accept what I can control and also stay organized has been important. A lot of it is eliminating distractions. The phrase I've used before, and I'm sure people have heard, is focus is what you don't do. So, it hasn't exactly been fun sometimes, but it's just like, I've eliminated a lot of things and kind of, decided to allocate a lot of my time if I can toward not just working on the restaurant, but those other pieces that are hopefully going to make me a better leader, better manager, better owner, better chef, whether it's just literally just like taking some time in the morning to read before getting to work. Honestly, a big thing is my son's about to be 3 years old. And so that provides balance in the sense where when he's around, it's him. It's all about him. And I mean, I love it. It's the best thing ever, but it's the perspective. I know that sounds a little cheesy, but the view of this process and the work has tangibly, I think, frankly, changed for me in light of having him in my life. And I'm not sure I can particularly, or properly articulate what that really means or how it's manifested, but it really does make you realize a lot of this is beyond just me, and this is hopefully something that's going to be something that is part of his life. Although I never want him to be in the kitchen. We've already talked about that. He has a little play kitchen. It's actually right in front of me. He's always playing on it, and we try to go to the restaurant every now and then and take family pictures. Although last time we went, it was not a good place for a 2.5-year-old to be in. Like exposed nails and something like that. We take the picture and we got to get out of here. But yeah, I think that's a lot of it too. I mean, and you just try not to make problems where they don't actually exist. And that's that. I know that sounds weird, but it's I work with a leadership coach time to time, and it's plans are just your imagination, is what he says. Which, I mean, if the past 3-4 years has proven anything else, is that, because this is not how the plan was supposed to go. And so it's just kind of that levity, really having that in place. I mean, it really setting the tone, obviously, for me is the number one thing. And frankly, that starts and has started already, not just when the doors open. So even just on this podcast, hopefully I sound like I know what I'm doing, but we'll find out.
Are you aware that the Aperture is either the or one of like the two most anticipated restaurants in Cincinnati? Like the other one is probably Wild Weed from Lydia and David Jackman. Like anytime you see any like local, like Cincinnati kind of press thing that touches on restaurants, the Aperture is just kind of woven in there real quick. And it'll be like the whole piece about something. And it'll be like, and the Aperture is supposed to open like summer of 2023. It's just like it's floated in there.
Well, they're probably tired of writing about it. All the writers are probably just like, I'm not doing this again. Like I'm not aware of it in a tangible or like qualitative sense. I do have a lot of people, Natty Wine Fest, a lot of people have expressed their excitement about it and really want to hear about it, which was a good exercise for me, because for the longest time, people would ask me questions like about the food and the concept, and I would just stumble over my words. And eventually, like people in my life, sister and my wife and stuff like, you got to get that down, man. Like you can't. you can't be walking around not knowing what to say about this restaurant you've been working on for 6 years. So that, that was a big task. I think, I joked with people that there is some buzz around it. I get it. And, people are just like, yeah, I'm like, but the joke is like, it's been almost 6 years. So if there wasn't attention around it, that'd probably be a bad sign. Like if people weren't writing about it, I'd be like, oh, they just gave up on this one. But you try to have some humility about it. And you could look at it, I think, in primarily one of two ways. You can look at it from the standpoint of like, we're getting attention. This is awesome. People hear about us. Like we're gonna do all these things. My mind is a little bit more trends the other direction and just understanding how difficult this is really going to be, and then that this is in people's minds. But more than anything, when you're in that type of position and the position that we have the opportunity to be in, first, it's nothing more than that. It's an opportunity. That's all it is. It's a chance. There's plenty of restaurants. I'm sure there's been hundreds that have had buzz and yada yada, and then didn't make it for whatever reason. So to sit there and rest on essentially preemptive laurels is not smart, but also there's a responsibility with that. I try to take that to heart. Whereas people are saying, things that, like this is going to be a big game changer for Cincinnati, or it's going to be something that's really going to, really, establish Walnut Hills and things like that. That's responsibility. That means that, you've been given an opportunity to do a lot of things that can improve people's lives. And in order to do that, you have to do the work. You have to take your ego out of it, and you have to understand that this is something that, I'm not going to say there's a mantle with it, but, for example, internally, we really want this place. It's a great place to work. There's no better way to say it. I mean, what that means, obviously, I still have a lot of work to do on it, and, whether that's, finalizing health insurance and things like that. But we want it to be a great place to work and a great place to eat. We want people to feel comfortable in there. And we want, more than anything, for this place to be basically kind of a ground for creating stories and connections and building connections, and a place where people leave and feel the impact of the restaurant after they've left. Whether that's in a physical sense where, you send them home with a card or something special, a signed menu or a custom menu. Whatever it is, we want the Aperture to resonate beyond just the four walls. That sounds, I get pretty ethereal and for something as largely simple as a restaurant. But that's really the way I look at it is I've had a lot of people, and I mean a lot, really support me throughout this in a lot of ways. Give their time, their money, their energy, their patience, their thoughts. And that doesn't even count the people that are going to come in there and eat. So, we kind of owe it to a lot of people to make this, is the best version it could possibly be. And again, like a lot of that is kind of just taking your ego out of it. I think, I'll be 36 in a few weeks, which makes me concerned if I can actually legitimately work service anymore. I can barely get up the steps and just carrying my son, my shoulder creaks. But, I think this might have been a different restaurant if I opened it, 4 or 5 years ago. And that's not to say it wouldn't have been good. I think it would have been successful, but it's between, all the things that have happened in the past few years, changes in my life, changing the circumstances around me and people and things like that. It's kind of, you're never really ready. You're never ready to do this. It's like kind of like having a baby. It's like, you're never really ready. But I think there's a sense of kind of purpose behind it that may not have been there before. And how that manifests, again, is up to me, and how I disseminate our messages and make sure that, again, internally our staff feels great, enough to work with each other to create something that people can be proud of and really enjoy.
What's your goal for the first year of the restaurant?
Not cry. I think just really smooth, get our feet under us. I think, again, that the timing is a little bit be interesting. And so say we do, open mid-late October, means we get, October, November, a little strange with kind of opening and having to manage, around the holidays. And then, the holidays in Cincinnati are huge. When I was at Boca a handful of years ago, I mean, numbers they were doing on a Saturday and December were ridiculous. I think that's an opportunity to really, the wave's going to come at us fast no matter what. So I think, so internally, I think my goal is to keep things simple. Let's start where something we can execute, knowing that we might, if all things work out well, have a pretty big wave of business for those first 10 to 12 weeks. And I think a big thing in the first 3 to 6 months is figuring out structure. You put things in place, but you have no idea how they're going to work out, whether that's staffing, how the line's structured and systems. And then slowly start to introduce kind of different wrinkles. By the end of the first year, I really would like us to have firmly in place kind of our private dining, be prepared to do special events, whether that's, a buyout or a guest chef dinner or a wine dinner. I have things written out on paper, like phases, like, phase one is this, phase two is that. And how well that goes, we'll see. But I think making sure that certain things can be not automated, but I'm, big on putting things on paper, like people, what's the process for this? Well, how do I do this? Well, here's the checklist. Just follow the checklist and you should be good. And I think that solves a lot of guesswork and saves people time. And so I think establishing the systems will be a big thing for that first year and changing them if necessary. Again, I've been working on my own. So if somebody's like, hey, this, especially if it's like a front of house process, which I am less involved in, making sure that they have they feel empowered to take care of that, or at least kind of come to the table and say this would be better done that way. And we are going to start with lower number of seats or a smaller number of seats than, our full capacity. And so we'll, if things go well for filling those seats and turning them over, then we'll, start to build. But a lot of it is building in just different wrinkles. And I think a big thing for me that first year is one of the positions, as much as I said, I don't want, specific positions that I would like to integrate is, for lack of a better title, essentially like a director of hospitality. So somebody that's really involved in not just service itself, but setting up people to have a great experience, again, before they come and after they leave. And really finding those little wrinkles in people's lives and people's stories that they can augment and make the experience better. Kind of like a hybrid, almost like a admin and service position. Just somebody who's really focused on the little things, if that makes sense. Not just the steps of service, but that sort of thing. And somebody that I think that could that's a role that somebody could grow into. And I think the other thing too, in the same vein, is making sure that we're establishing ourselves as much as possible that people can progress and not get stuck in positions. If somebody's really doing well with something, we want to find ways to give them an opportunity to grow. I think for example, brunch. One of the things about brunch is that cooks and servers, that they kind of it's not the most loved service, but for example, that is an opportunity for, say, there's a sous chef who's really doing a great job, and someone on the floor is doing a great job, and it's like, okay, we're gonna set you guys up to brunch is yours. Menu planning, the service, and that's an example of within the structure of the existing restaurant, and the existing services, saying we're gonna kind of train you guys to do the things, and then eventually, that's a day where I step away and I say, this is your day, your service. You run it as you see fit, and I'd like to think those things go a long way. Or I think again that goes back to finding ways to make sure that the people that come in our doors to work and are part of the team have growth opportunities wherever we can provide them. But that's it takes a lot of work, and kind of you really have to pay attention to things in order to be able to do that, and then figure out where those things exist, those cracks where you can expand things for people to grow.
Where can people send resumes, apply? How do they do that? Message?
I'm working that. It'll be up on Instagram, I think, next week. I'm hoping maybe by the end of this Sunday. So I think by the time this comes out, it should be up. But essentially, we're going to have, we'll put a post on Instagram, and then also that'll kind of lead to the website, and really want to make that process as easy as possible. No cover letter or anything like that. So yeah, we'll first set ourselves up for management, our managerial positions, and kind of see who's interested in that, and kind of go from there based on, we could receive a bunch of resumes, we could receive two, and then, I'd like to learn, find that out earlier than later. And then again, down the road, we'll work on hourly. Management is a little bit different, obviously. And if they are somebody who's working somewhere else, and give them proper time to give notice and things like that, and have a few conversations. The biggest thing, honestly, with the way, manage more than anybody, but also hourly is opening a restaurant is really hard. It's rough. It's going to be one of those where, you can always sugarcoat it so much, and just in terms of like the hours and kind of the stress and the grind. And there's maybe people out there who are really experienced and really great at the job that just don't want to go through that, and you have to respect that. And that's a big thing. Is I want to start down those conversations sooner than later, and make sure, again, I'm being honest about, like, I can never expect somebody to do the hours that I'm doing. That's just unrealistic. I don't. Like, on one end, you want to set the example. On the other, I just have to do my job. And, I don't want to see anybody doing the hours that I am. But at the same time, there are going to be hard days, and it is going to be a challenge. So making sure that people are aware of that, but also finding whatever ways possible there are to not make it harder than it needs to be. Again, like keeping that open menu, like good quality in line with our standards, but also just executable, and being realistic about product and prep time and the fact that there are things that are going to go wrong. Yeah, I think hopefully I'm hoping by I have like a huge calendar somewhere over there that's probably wildly off in terms of the dates now, but I think I'm hoping by kind of mid-September we have a good idea of our management team and have, early September have made some firm offers and kind of go from there. If not sooner, actually. Again, that my contract is for better or worse kind of calling the game right now. Whatever they say in terms of timeline is the one I'm rolling with. So.
No, it's exciting. I mean, I know it's something that you've been working hard on and been, like you said, for a number of years. This has been in the works. It's amazing, like how many restaurants are opening this year, and you can trace all that back to the fact that the pandemic happened and it wiped out. It did more than that, but I mean, essentially, it wiped out a year and a half of just delays of if anybody was even thinking about opening a restaurant during that time. Like it kicked everything like a year and a half to 2 years. That's not even attributing like the supply chain issues and all the other stuff that goes into it. It's just literally just the timeline like bumped everything. And now here in Columbus, I think there's 10 to 12 places like in the know places that are opening this year. Some have already opened, like Aperture's place already opened, but BJ's place is about to open.
I mean, and I think I said this before, in a certain sense, like we were lucky because when the pandemic hit, we basically were in a position where we collectively, meaning, me and my team, model group, bank, like contractor, we were in a position where we basically had nothing to gain by powering forward through, obviously we had no idea what was going to happen and nothing really to lose by stopping. Basically, no one had anything like heavily invested quite yet. Model group, obviously we signed the lease, but they were, their goal is to have successful businesses, so they weren't trying to go too far. And I think, I can't really remember, but I think Esoteric, our neighbor, they were too far down the road to pull back. So I think they opened that October in 2020. I'm almost certain that's when they did. Pretty sure BJ opened Chapman's pretty right in that range too. And obviously they're doing great now. But yeah, I think, it's, you can kind of look, there's a lot of different reasons things have happened. Some people saw this as an opportunity to get out of the game. And I think, there's some restaurants where people are just like, this is, and not just restaurants, businesses in general. Now there's a new crop coming up. And I think a lot of people saw this as a chance to kind of take, you mentioned David and Lydia. Danny Combs, his spot is opening soon. Pretty soon, next, probably, definitely before me, I think. And then, you have the stuff, Bees Barbecue, they're on the second location. They're a great spot. I mean, that's, some fantastic barbecue in Madisonville, and he's opened the second location. So there's some things happening here that are really exciting. I think a lot of, there's a lot of ones I can't even name. I know there's some the guys from Liberties, and there's a bunch of stuff. I don't want to name wrong places or attribute the wrong people, but I know of 7, 8 new things coming down the line that. And I think also they're from homegrown people. They're from people that are from for the most part from the area. And I think there's something to be said for that. I think it's exciting, and it's creating kind of a new community of farmers and chefs and butchers and people, bartenders. There's a lot of great wine coming in. New companies, Voyager up in Columbus. I think only a year or two old. Chris with Parcel down here. All over the place, you see some really great stuff happening, and I think it's a nice wave, and I think hopefully everybody is able to do the things that they want to do. Get the opportunities that they wanted to have, and it's exciting. I mean, it's a nice sense of solidarity, talking to other people who are going down the same road, and also talking to people who've done it before. I mean, that's almost more important is talking to even people like Jose, who's been doing this for a long time, and just getting a few minutes to pick his brain and just understanding, what it takes to get to that point and how they did it and how they view things. And that knowledge sharing, I think, is really great in Cincinnati. I'm not sure you can necessarily say that for all places. And it goes a long way toward, kind of the community aspect of the city, even as it grows, leaps and bounds compared to what it looked like when I was, in high school.
We're looking forward to it opening and definitely be making the drive down to try it. We're always happy to see people finally get to that point where they're just doing their own thing and they're putting their own spin on it. And it's more of it's coming in Columbus, but like that's the cool thing about Detroit. People dump all over Detroit, and like financially, the city, like okay, but like every restaurant in that city is basically independently owned. Like there's really no chain restaurants like there. Like yes, there are, but they're on the back burner. It's pretty like amazing when you go up there, and it's just like every place that you go to is going to be an independently owned thing. Like there's no duplicates of it. There's not like, I mean, aside from I think like Michael Simon's, barbecue or whatever that's up there, I think he's got like 2 or 3 locations, but a city like moves like that. So
Yeah, there's a place up there called Ladder 4 Wine Bar. I still, if the guys up there listening, I'm sorry, I still haven't been up there. I'll get up there soon, but putting out some crazy food. I mean, just like, they're like a true wine bar, and pouring some crazy wines. But there's other places up there. I've been there a couple times. It's a great time up there. And look, at the end of the day, people get make fun of and talk shit like Detroit and like kind of like Cleveland, like the Midwest. But there's a lot of cities with like rich histories. That 70, 80 years ago were part of the key culture of the United States and in America and the fabric of it. And I think there's some of that's coming back a little bit. And I think people are realizing that you don't have to be in a tier 1A city in order to try something new or do something new. And look, I spent 9 years in DC. I mean, it's just a different world when you're playing in that pool. But there's a lot of fun things happening here, and for us, we're hopefully soon. I'll feel comfortable starting really kind of the cycle of like getting the word out there. It's not that I don't want to do it; it's just that news cycles are so short now, and I've had so many. There's articles released from 2019 about this, and it's just like nobody's reading that now. So we're doing a lot of stuff. Internally, obviously, this is going to be, fun piece to get out there. We're doing a small film project here, sort of like I guess call it a mini documentary / trailer series that we're filming periodically, and then hopefully I think in September or so going to start releasing, bits and pieces of, and we're doing, start doing some photography soon. We're, a lot of it too is utilizing this as a creative ground. We really want to showcase the narrative of it beyond just kind of what goes on during service, and building that sense of story and community and communicating, what our values are, who we want to be, and really just inviting people in. It's pretty much standard these days to kind of break the fourth wall and give people an insight into what you're doing, your work, and who you are. How you do that though is I think a more kind of complicated and interesting choice, and so I think we want to do a lot, to kind of define our own narrative. And so, as much as it feels weird kind of having, cameras, and then doing kind of like interviews, I think it'll be fun. And just a unique way to communicate, about the restaurant beyond, like a Instagram post or just, a quick, caption. And yeah, there will be a lot coming soon in terms of hiring and kind of getting the word out there. And we just want to make sure that we're being honest with everybody and ourselves about the timing and realistic about, if we say, it's basically the point. If we're going to say we're opening in this range, like we need to be able to make that realistic and honest. And I think we're very close to being able to do that.
All good stuff, man. Super excited. Can't wait to try it.
But yeah, thanks, man. This has been great. It's great catching up, and hopefully we'll see you down, very soon here in the restaurant.
Big thanks again to Jordan for coming back on the podcast, giving everybody an update, kind of behind the scenes look at the Aperture, which again will be opening sometime this October. It's kind of what they're targeting right now. Again, check out their Instagram. Jordan's you can follow. It's J. Anthony Brown, all one word, no hyphens or spaces or anything. Also the restaurant at the Aperture Cincy, CINCI. They'll be posting a link for the openings that they have where people can go to apply. That'll be all on the website for the Aperture and everything. As they get rolling with the hiring process and are looking for people that are passionate about hospitality and want to be involved in a cool project that is going to be a great work environment. So it's going to be cool to see the Aperture open. I'm really excited to see kind of what it all materializes into. Jordan for a period has been posting very minimalistic parts of the blueprint. So it kind of looks like it's really art, but it's like kind of black and white sections of the blueprint and like the design process. So it's kind of one of those like little Easter egg things that if you've been following along, maybe you've picked up on that. Yeah, I think it's going to be cool. I mean, it's a good location. Walnut Hills area is kind of the next area to grow and be part of kind of the Cincinnati revitalization. So a lot of cool things happening there. And we're super excited for him to finally get this open, as he's been working on it for a long time. So coming to fruition, just hopefully he gets to enjoy kind of that friends and family night and is not, freaking out or anything, or, because a lot of stuff goes wrong. That's kind of the trial and error time. But yeah, it's still something that, once you get to that point, you got to take a step back for a couple minutes and just kind of take it all in, because 6 years up to this point is a long time to be working on anything and stopping and starting and stopping and starting. It's follow us on Instagram too as well. Check out the website, spoonmob.com. Make sure to follow, subscribe to the podcast, whatever player that you use. That is it for this mini update episode, which wound up being a full-length podcast. We will have another episode for you guys on Thursday. Brand new episode, brand new guest. So get ready for that. We'll talk to you guys then.